Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 29th of November and we are going to deal with one very important topic which is there. As we all know that COP 28 of UNFCC is going to start in UAE from 30th of November, that is tomorrow. So today's session and tomorrow's session will be a build up to that UNFCC COP 28. Means what has been done in previous COPs is Conference of Parties. We will see right from the very beginning, that is right from 1992 onwards. In brief, we'll cover what were the important COPs, what has been done, so that the build up to this year's COP 28 is there with you, the background is there with you, and then whatever will happen in this year COP, we will be covering that also in detail. But to get those or connect with those, it would be better that you know the background. So today's lecture and tomorrow's lecture is focusing on this. So let's get started. The first topic which we're going to cover is COP 28 of UNFCC. This is happening. COP means Conference of Parties. This is actually an annual meeting. Nothing more than that. Where all the members of United Nations Framework for Combating Climate Change, they gather at different places every year, once in a year, and they discuss this very important and pressing chapter of climate change. So this year's Conference of Party, that is this 28th meeting, is going to be held in UAE. What can we expect from this? We will study. But most importantly, what has been the build up? Various COPs which have been conducted till now. The important ones. We are not obviously going to cover each and every year's COP, but the important ones. Those ones in which some landmark decisions have been taken. And most importantly, we'll cover last year's COP 27, which happened in Sharm el Sheikh. What has been or what have been the outcomes in this Sharm el Sheikh's COP 27, which happened last year in the month of November. So this will actually give you the background of last year's, and this will give you the background of the previous years. In a nutshell, we're going to cover this. And in tomorrow's session, we are going to cover what expectations can we keep from this year's COP 28. Because see, in between these COPs, this year's COP is in UAE, last year Sharm el Sheikh. In between over here was the Bonn Convention, which was not a COP, but yes, a build up to COP 28 after COP 27. This happened this year in June, that is June 2023. So this we will cover tomorrow, and these two we are covering today. COP 28 of UNFCCC. Actually, for the very first time for climate change, the global leaders met in the year 1972. The event came to be known as the Stockholm Convention. Coincidentally, the date was 5th of June, and that is why 5th of June is celebrated as the World Environment Day. It was just a meeting, no concrete things happened. But yes, 20 years down the line, that is 1992, the world leaders again met, and this time they met in Rio de Janeiro, basically Brazil. There the global leaders decided and 3 conventions were adopted. The first convention, United Nations Framework for Combating Climate Change, this is one. Second was United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. The third was United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. all these conventions had their respective meetings. And some conventions like these two, CBD, that is Convention on Biodiversity, and Convention on Combating Desertification, they were meeting once in 2 years. But UNFCCC, from its very first COP that was held in 1995, it was in Germany, Berlin. There the leaders decided that for climate change we will be meeting every year, and we will be calling these meetings as COP. So the I would say legacy of COPs started from 1995 onwards, and it is still going on. This year it is the 28th meeting, and this year's meeting is in UAE, where all the members, means all 198 members are there of UNFCCC. They meet, they discuss. There are differences, there are problems, there are, I would say, situations where deadlocks are there. But yes, the global leaders are trying to find solutions. So we will see, what has been the journey of COP. Let's get into the details of this. Now in 1992, the Rio Earth Summit, 154 countries signed a multilateral treaty called United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. Apart from UNFCCC, there were two other, I would say, frameworks signed: United Nations Convention Convention on Biodiversity, plus United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. We are not going to discuss these two, but yes, we will be only focusing on UNFCCC because COP28 of UNFCCC is there. The rest have their own pace of meetings. Their meetings are also called as COPs. Like for example, in 2022, both UNCBD and UNCCD, they had their COP 15. It aimed to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic, means human-induced interference with the climate system. There are 198 parties or signatories to the convention. COP28 of UNFCCC is scheduled in UAE from 30th November to 12th of December. Now let us see the, I would say, important COPs since 1995, since the first, I would say, COP was Berlin, 1995. What happened at this meeting? At this meeting, an agreement was reached to meet annually to discuss action on climate change and emission reductions. So it was decided in COP1 that COPs of UNFCCC are going to be an annual affair. So it was there in COP1, which happened in Berlin. The next important COP, 1997 it came, COP number 3, which happened in Kyoto. A very important, I would say, landmark, that is Kyoto Protocol, was, adopted in this. In Kyoto Protocol, the countries were divided into developed and developing. These developed countries were said that you have caused global warming because it is the emissions done by you historically. That is, when industrial revolution started, you started emitting then. And those emissions done by you then, due to which you became developed, have caused global warming. And the developing countries, underdeveloped countries, they did not, contribute in emissions to that scale, and they are suffering the most right now. So it is an obligation on you to, cut your emissions. You cannot emit beyond a certain limit. This kind of obligation was, put, or I would say, sanctioned on the developed countries in Kyoto Protocol. Or we can say that in Kyoto Protocol, the world was divided into developed versus developing or underdeveloped. Obviously, the developed countries did not like this kind of obligations on them. So, things were going on. Now, 2009, COP15, it happened in Copenhagen. What was adopted over here? The developed countries were asked to pay $100 billion per year to the developing and underdeveloped countries. You have to invest this much in developing and underdeveloped countries from 2020 onwards every year. Reason? Historical responsibility, moral obligations on you. So this is, I would say, was decided in COP 15 of 2009. Then came 2015. Actually, this division between developed and developing, or developed and underdeveloped on one side, it was not working because the developed world was not liking these kind of obligations on them. So, they actually, the world leaders decided to do away with this. The world leaders decided to do away with this. They said that, we are going to, keep everyone at same place. Obviously, financially everyone cannot be kept at same place. So what division was done in Kyoto Protocol? Developed versus developing or underdeveloped. This division was done away with. He said that everyone is on same plane and everyone has to decide what their intentions are. How do they intend to conserve the environment? What they can contribute. Obviously, everyone will be contributing according to their capacities. The developed countries will be contributing more, developing less, underdeveloped lesser. But everyone had to put forth their intended nationally determined contributions, INDCs, we call them. And whether developed, developing or underdeveloped, all had to give. And, they had to meet those targets. Obviously, for meeting those targets, they needed money, developing and underdeveloped especially. So this was there. $100 billion per year investment had to be done by the developed countries into developing or underdeveloped. But, this division in COP3, that is Kyoto Protocol, between developed and underdeveloping, obligations on developed, that was finished. So INDCs were adopted by each and every country. India submitted 3 INDCs. And when the world saw India's INDCs, the world said that India, you are crazy. You are, having a very, too high ambitious INDCs which you will not be able to meet because you are a developing country. India said, don't worry. That's my problem. Another thing which was there in 2015 was we set this target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. This target of 1.5 degrees Celsius, I've explained earlier also, but again, I'll explain. Let's suppose X degrees Celsius is the average temperature of pre-industrial era. That is 1850 to 1900. The 50 years, these 50 years, the average temperature is X degrees Celsius. Now, what is this 1.5 degrees Celsius target? That by 2100, means by the end of this century, the global average temperatures should be X plus 1.5 degree Celsius. If we have to, avoid the catastrophic impact of climate change, this 1.5 degrees Celsius target was adopted in COP21, that has happened in Paris, called as Paris Pact 2015. INDCs, 1.5 degrees Celsius target. India submitted its 3 INDCs, and in COP21 only it was mentioned that you have to renew your INDCs 5 years down the line. So 5 years down the line from 2015 was COVID. But in 2021, it is not 2026, it is 2021. COP26 happened in Glasgow. India adopted new set of INDCs. Earlier we had 3 here, now we had 5. The world again was looking at us. India said, older INDCs though I've met or I'm about to meet. Now it's the time to upgrade. So 5 INDCs, our Prime Minister referred to it as Panchamrit. Another thing, mission life was unanimously accepted. Unanimously accepted by the world leaders. It was proposed by India again. Mission life is what? Lifestyle for environment. We've discussed about it as well. Okay. So this has been, I would say, the build up till 2021. And in 2022, we had COP27 of UNFCCC, which happened in, a beach, I would say, city called as the Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. The aim was to build on the outcomes of COP26, which happened in 2021 in Glasgow, and constantly strive for meeting the 1.5 degree Celsius target, which was kept in the Paris Agreement, all the other things which had to be discussed. Some important outcomes were also there, like loss and damage. Loss and damage is whatever loss has been caused by climate induced disasters in developing or underdeveloped countries has to be compensated by the developed countries. Again, moral obligation, moral responsibility due to historical emissions done by the developed countries of today. Like, for example, last year there were floods in Pakistan, and Pakistan had been demanding reparation claims by the developed world. And Pakistan's, I would say, logic was that the floods which has been caused in Pakistan is due to climate change. Pakistan was able to prove that scientifically. And these floods, the climate change, who is responsible? The developed countries. So whatever loss has been done in Pakistan has to be compensated by the developed countries. That is the concept of loss and damage, which was formally inducted in COP27 of UNFCC last year in Sharm el Sheikh. So we'll discuss in detail the United Nations Framework to Combat Climate Change Conference 2022 was held in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. Built on the outcomes of COP26, COP27 seeks renewed solidarity between countries to deliver on landmark Paris Agreement. Renewed solidarity. See, there's a conflict with respect to climate change. That conflict is developed versus developing. The developed countries do not want obligations on them. The developing countries, they want finance, climate finance from the developed countries. The developing countries say it is now our time to develop, and for developing, emissions will happen. Emissions will happen if you have to develop. So it is now our time to develop, and now we are being asked to impose restrictions on our emissions, and due to which we will not be able to develop. So that is, I would say, the conflict in these kind of, I would say, climate meetings. It included the issue of loss and damage in its formal main agenda for the first time ever. What is loss and damage? As I already explained, it refers to the costs the rich and developed countries who are majorly responsible for industrial emissions should pay to poorer nations that have made negligible contributions to pollution but are more vulnerable to extreme climate events. For example, devastating floods in Pakistan, which happened last year. The significance of this loss and damage: developing countries, including India, are pushing countries to agree to a new global climate finance target, also known as New Collective Quantifiable Goal, NCQG. Now, presently, we saw that in the last slide in 2009 in COP15, Copenhagen, $100 billion per year from 2020 onwards has to be invested by the developed countries in developing and underdeveloped countries. But, this $100 billion is not enough. So the developing and underdeveloped countries are also saying that we need to increase this. Increase by how much? We don't know right now. This is being discussed as the new collective quantified goal. And loss and damage funds will also be part of this, because loss and damage, the principle is the same. The developed countries have to finance the loss and damages in the developing countries or underdeveloped countries due to disasters happening due to climate change, known as climate induced disasters. So this is there. Now, Sharm el Sheikh adaptation agenda was adopted in order to mitigate the disastrous effects of climate change. COP27 presidency in Sharm el Sheikh adopted this Sharm el Sheikh adaptation agenda. 30 goals are there to improve resilience for 4 billion people, means half the population. Now, according to IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this is, I would say, a scientific research organization under United Nations which does scientific research and all on climate change or global warming. According to its analysis, nearly half of the world's population will be at risk of severe climate change impacts by 2030. Even in a 1.5 degree Celsius world, 1.5 degree Celsius world means assuming that we are meeting that x plus 1.5 degrees Celsius target by 2100, even in that scenario also, half of the world will be at risk according to IPCC. Also during COP27 summit, CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, announced setting up Infrastructure Resilient Accelerator Fund, IRAF, which we will study what IRAF is in the coming slides. Now about this agenda, adaptation agenda, 30 adaptation goals are there to enhance resilience for 4 billion people living in the most climate vulnerable communities by 2030. Each outcome presents global solutions that can be adopted at local level to respond to local climate context. Collectively, these outcomes present first comprehensive global plan to rally both state and non-state actors. Means NGOs and all will also be involved in this. There are 5 impact systems for which this, I would say, 30 adaptation goals are going to be targeted. Food and agriculture, water and nature, coastal and oceans, human settlements and infrastructure, and finally, including enabling solutions for planning and finance. This is the most important, then only this will happen. Now, these are some areas in which it will be focusing upon, like food, promote healthy alternative proteins, restoring the degraded land. All these things are going to be there. Now, another, I would say, alliance, which was, I would say, into formulation during the Sharm el Sheikh COP27 of UNFCCC, and that was known as Global Offshore Wind Alliance. The main theme, or I would say offshore wind energy, it is a kind of a renewable energy. Now, 9 countries, they formed this Global Offshore Wind Alliance. The main agenda is that by 2050, they have to develop 2000 gigawatts capacity of offshore wind all across the world, if they have to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius target by 2100. So again, a lot of things are revolving around that 1.5 degrees Celsius target, which was set up by the world leaders in COP21 of 2015, that is Paris Pact. 9 countries, including Britain, Germany, United States, and Japan, joined an international alliance recently at COP27. It was set up by International Renewable Energy Agency, Denmark, and the Global Wind Energy Council. These kind of facts are important for prelims. The alliance is supported by a number of organizations which are actively promoting offshore wind energy in offshore wind industry in their different regions. Total members 9. Is India a member? No, India is not a member. Belgium, Colombia, Ireland, Japan, Netherlands, Norway, Britain, USA, and this. Japan is repeated twice. Yes, these are the countries. About Goa, not Goa, but GOWA wala Goa. Global Offshore Wind Alliance established to remove barriers to the energy, provide the growing offshore wind industry with the one-stop shop overview of all offshore wind industry events around the world. It will act like an expert hub. It will act like a finance center also. It will act like technology transfer centers. Both IRENA and International Energy Agency expect that offshore wind capacity will need to exceed to 2000 gigawatt in 2050, which is around 60 gigawatt today only, if we have to meet this 1.5 degrees Celsius target. To reach this target, Goa will also aim to contribute to accelerating growth to reach a total of at least 380 gigawatts installed capacity by 2030. Means target is by 2030 380 gigawatts and by 2050 2000 gigawatts. Still, from 2030 till 2050, in these 20 years, a lot of work will have to be done, because we have to be installing around 1600 gigawatts of wind energy according to this. Next is Infrastructure Resilience Accelerator Fund. We saw it in the previous slides, where CDRI has formed this fund. Now, what is CDRI? Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. It is basically an expert hub, or I would say a knowledge hub, where all the knowledges or all the best practices for making the existing infrastructure disaster resilient. Like for example, you are constructing roads, and there are overhead transmission cables of, let's suppose, electricity. What you can do is you can put them underground. Whenever any disasters will come, that will not be impacted. That is, you're making the same infrastructure disaster resilient. These kind of best practices are there in CDRI, which is headquartered in India. CDRI. So it is not financing countries for creating those infrastructures, but yes, it is giving them technical expertise. It is giving them knowledge, how to make existing infrastructures disaster resilient. And this infrastructure resilience accelerator fund is basically that fund which is going to, help CDRI, implement these kind of best practices all across the world. So you'll see this about IRAF. This fund will support global action to build robust infrastructure, especially in developing countries and small island developing nations that can withstand the impacts of climate change. IRAF will be a multi-donor trust fund managed by UN Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office, New York. Supported by India, UK, Australia and the European Union, IRAF's multi-pronged program will offer customized technical assistance, capacity building, research, knowledge management and advocacy across infrastructure life cycle for countries at all stages of development. So this fund is not going to make infrastructure projects. That has to be done by other funds, other domestic funds, international funds, doesn't matter irrespective of that fact. But to make those infrastructure disaster resilient, this fund will be used. So it is only $50 million. If it would have been creating infrastructure, so it would be in billions. But it is only 50 million. So it is only going for, customized technical assistance, capacity building, research, knowledge sharing and all these things will be done by this kind of fund. Then another, organization which was formed in COP27, that was Mangrove Alliance for Climate. Mangrove Alliance for Climate, it was, I would say, spearheaded by UAE and Indonesia, that this kind of alliance should be there. Now, what are mangroves? Mangroves are those kind of, I would say, flora which can grow in salty water. And are they important? Very important they are. Why they are important? Because they have more carbon sequestration capacity. Means, according to some estimates, mangroves can suck in 10 times more carbon dioxide than other terrestrial plants. They can suck in carbon dioxide at a faster rate also as compared to other terrestrial plants. They can save, the people living over there from various disasters like cyclones, because they act like sponge whenever cyclone comes. And mangrove forests are there in, the coastal regions only. Like, for example, if I talk about India, this is the coastline. Mangrove forest will be found here only in these regions, in the coastal areas, because salty water is present over here only. Okay. So whenever cyclone comes, so cyclone makes a landfall as soon as it meets the land, and mangrove forests, they are there in the salty marshes and all. So there, it will make a landfall and it will save the population which is inside these mangroves. India has huge amount of mangroves. Sundarban Delta is all full of mangroves. Okay. So we'll see what this Mangrove Alliance for Climate is. UAE, in partnership with Indonesia, this MAC was announced, Mangrove Alliance for Climate. It was launched at COP27 summit to scale up and accelerate the conservation and restoration of the mangrove forest. What are mangroves? It is a shrub or a small tree that grows along the coastlines and has roots and salty sediments. It grows in coastlines and it has its roots in salty sediments, often underwater they are. They also grow in swamps. Mangrove forests can survive extreme weather conditions and require low oxygen levels to survive. They cannot survive freezing temperatures. Hence, they are found in the tropics only. Like, this is the equator, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. Mangroves generally are found in these regions only because, they cannot survive freezing temperature. July 26, it is considered as International Day for Conservation of Mangroves. About MAC, the Alliance will raise awareness about the role of mangroves as a nature-based solution to climate change. MAC seeks to scale up, accelerate conservation, restoration and growing plantation efforts of mangrove ecosystems for the benefit of communities globally. According to MAC, mangrove forest can store 10 times more carbon per hectare. They can store carbon up to 400% faster, means 5 times faster than land-based tropical rainforests. According to Global Mangrove Alliance, when the mangroves are cut, the carbon stored in these plants gets released into the air. Since they are storing more carbon, and when they are cut, it gets released into the air, it will, amplify global warming. Obviously, we do not need to cut these saviors, I would say, because they are actually taking in more and more carbon. And if we cut them, we will be, hurting ourselves only. Now, once the plants die, they take this stored carbon into the soil. These mangrove plants, they die natural death, then they will decay, decompose, they will make carbon, and that carbon will be called as blue carbon. Moreover, mangrove forests act as natural barriers against rising tides and storms. As I told you, the case of cyclone. Each year, they prevent property damages of over $65 billion. Why to cut them? Why not to conserve them? Why not to, more and more create mangrove forests? That is what this Mangroves Alliance for, this climate is. Mangrove Alliance for Climate is. So, this is basically what all happened, major things, major developments which happened in COP27. Now, we've seen the background, other COPs, COP27. Tomorrow's session, we will be seeing what happened in the Bonn Convention, which was there between COP27 and the upcoming COP28. This is it from today's session. I will be seeing you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.